James Lutton, delighted to be joined with Jamie Jewitt. Jamie, how are you, mate?
Yes, very good, James. Very good, mate. Thanks for having us on for a chat.
I want to talk to you a little bit about influencer boxing. Now, this is the potential crowd that you would fall under as an influencer, as using Love Island, etc., reality TV. Now, as much as I get the critics, myself included, I call them the circus personally. However, does this shed a good light on boxing for the younger generation? Because this generation is a social media generation, and it is putting new eyes on the sport. And as you mentioned, we want to get more kids into the gym for their mental health, for their physical health. Is it a good thing about these influencers getting involved?
I'm on both sides of the fence here, depending on the argument. I say one thing: is it good for for boxing as a sport? I would argue that it's a different sport altogether. I don't agree that it is boxing in the essence of amateur and professional boxing. It's not this. They haven't gone through the same sort of rites of passage. They haven't learnt the same things. It's not the same amount of dedication and rules. Don't get me wrong. Say influencer boxing is around for another 10 years, then it's going to start morphing into something that looks a bit more like the sport of boxing that we know. But at the moment, for me, it is a pseudo WWE entertainment version of a combat sport that we love. So yes, it's great for boxing to bring new eyes to the sport when they realize, oh, this is real boxing. Let's go and watch this if you enjoyed the influencer boxing. But there'll be reasons kids will really enjoy influencer boxing, may not enjoy boxing as a sport. That's why I say that for me, I compartmentalize them as two different things. I think what DAZN and Misfits are doing fantastically well, they're playing on the fact that they're not claiming to be boxing. Even now they're doing the tag team match and things like that, and their ring walks are really extravagant and funny. All the people who fight are massive characters and they make a real show out of it. That I'm all for. I think they're doing it brilliantly. It's a different thing. It's called Misfits. It is what it is. They're not claiming to be pros. They're not claiming to be the best fighters in the world. But as I said a minute ago, like, they are getting better, and as the quality goes up, it might morph into something a little bit more like the sport we love. But at the minute, I think it's a separate entity. I think it's great. Go for it. As long as like they do, they understand that it's something completely different. I don't think boxing fans should be threatened by it. I don't think boxers should be threatened by it. There's a lot each can learn from each other. Do you know what I mean? Because it is a different world. It's a little bit more of a circus, a little bit more slapstick. It's a little bit more silly. But if people want to watch these two people they know and watch off telly punch each other in the face, and they're going to pay for it, and these guys are going to put on a great show and talk it up and build up the fights and make fun of themselves, I think, I'm all for it. I'm all for that side, but I'm not all for. Do you know one thing I've got a real problem with? Somebody like Idris Virgo going into Misfits. Fighting Anthony Taylor, fine. Anthony Taylor's had a few fights. He's a little bit more of a professional than the other guys. But then calling out the likes of Slim and that at the end of it, a guy like that, even having the fucking audacity to call their name, because I know he probably would get in there and fight, that should not be fucking allowed. You saw what he done to Anthony Taylor. The guy's a very good fighter. He's got no business being in there. If he's going to fight a real pro in Misfits, fine. But that's where you're starting to blur the lines between what's influencer boxing and what's not. And until, that's why I think it needs to be like defined as something different. So that crossover can't be happening, because the fact that you can go and call Slim and people like that out, any of those guys, he'd hurt them. And I think he fucking knows that. And I understand he wants to get paid. It's not anything against Idris personally, but that shouldn't be happening. That shouldn't be allowed. And then, like, if pro boxers are going to go over there and have easy meat, so to speak, that's where the whole thing becomes a bit dangerous and does turn into a circus. So for me, keep them separate. Like, Misfits are doing brilliant shows. They're growing, they're changing, they're morphing into their own thing. That's great. Do it. Keep it over there. Boxing, stay boxing, and make sure if you're a pro boxer, don't go beating up any influencer, no matter how mouthy they get, because that's where the sport needs to be respected, because boxers will hurt novice influencers. They will. So, if they don't want their whole thing to crumble under some form of fucking lawsuit or tragedy, they need to keep them things separate. So that's my 10 cents on the whole lot.
Jake Paul, is he considered a real boxer yet?
To me, mate, Jake Paul has fought. Yeah, he fought a couple of athletes that are outside of his discipline. He fought a basketballer and he's fought a few MMA guys, but they're professional combat professionals, like combat sports professionals, these MMA guys. They're fighters. They get in there in a professional boxing ring, 10-ounce gloves on under the pro rules. I'm happy with that. I'm happy to say Jake Paul, he's only improving. He's getting to a very decent level. He is pretty much a novice pro now. He done a different thing though. He didn't go around like when he fought Logan Paul, he was the same level as Logan Paul. He'd never fought before, but he decided to take it one step further. He upped his opposition. He trained really hard. He trained with all these pros, probably paid for the best sparring money can buy. Guy's got a lot of money. I'm respectful, I respect the bloke. I think he's done very well. And I think people need to start understanding out of all of them, he's a boxer now. Do you know what I mean? It's like, let's face it, you've got people with little to no amateur experience in the program. You've got Fabio Wardley, British champion. He never had an amateur fight in his life. He had his white collar fights. You don't need to go through amateur boxing to be a good professional. We know that, but like there's, there are exceptions to the rules. But Jake Paul, he had a white collar fight. Was it 2 or was the second one pro straight away? Wasn't it? Eddie Hearn did the second one, the rematch. But he's had 7 or 8 fights now, something like that. He's upped his opposition. It's like he could have done that in white collar. He could have done that in amateur. Like if he wants to turn in and start fighting real pros, like he's fighting Tommy Fury, I think he's done enough. And at the end of the day, if you're looking at, say, I'm the board of control and I'm about to give someone their license, someone comes in with 7 or 8 fights experience with some wins. Some of those wins are against fighting professionals, maybe not in that discipline, but you're going to sit there and go, okay, it's safe to give you a pro license. It's all about safety. Do you know what I mean? I think it's safe for him to be in with the pros. I'd watch Jake Paul fight. I just don't think he'd win, but he's done enough to be like, that's not so silly. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit more like that. So I'm actually really looking forward to Jake Paul, Tommy Fury. For some reason in my head, I've been led to believe that Jake Paul might be able to win it. I don't know if I'm just going along with with the hype. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if I'm being tricked by all of this. But I'm intrigued, and that's how you get money out of people, mate. Make them want to know what's going to happen. And I'm there, mate. I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to watch it. So yeah, someone shoot me.
Little project you've been working on. I'll let you take over and have a little chat about it.
Yeah, well, to be honest, it's just been released, Fighting on the Inside. What people won't realise with this is it's been about 3 years in the making. I think I spoke to you probably last time, was sometime before or around lockdown. I came up with this idea back then, a long time ago. And the main sort of crux of the idea, the main foundation of it is because boxing sort of helped me. It's changed my life. It's helped me mentally, physically, everything. But I think we're sort of missing something where I really, really believe for a sport that people believe to be brutal and to be a combat sport, I think it's one of the most important scenarios or important situations to find yourself in for mental growth. And for something that's supposed to be brutal, like I say, I think it actually has the complete opposite effect. I think it has the real ability to teach people how to harness a side of themselves by putting in a one-on-one situation and been training and having discipline and being taught all these different things that make you be able to fight somebody one-on-one in the ring in an organized bout. They're all transferable skills that once you've learned to harness the fear, the anxiety, the emotion, the anger, the adrenaline, all of those cocktail of things that happen to you in that moment, you can transfer that, and it helps you in all of these different moments in your life where you're going to run into a situation that's going to make you freak out or panic or be aggressive or anything like that. It will help you in all of those situations. It calms you down. It will help you sort of learn a lot about yourself, learn a lot about discipline and respect. And I think it will do a really, really good. It will go a long way in helping young kids get off the streets. It will help like youngsters sort of understand themselves and their emotions a bit more. It help with people's mental health. And that's how I've found boxing. That's what I think boxing can do. So the idea for this was just basically speak to people that fight for a living, that do exactly what I just described, that have done it since they were young, and see if there is any sort of unexpected lessons there that we can all translate into our own personal lives, whether you box or not, whether you're into the sport or not. I really do believe there's a lot of lessons we can learn from these guys about how to learn a lot about ourselves, how we work, how we tick, and how to harness all those things. So the idea for the podcast came up, and we did it in conjunction with a really good charity called Gloves Up, Knives Down that I've done a lot of work with. Doing amazing work up and down the country, nationally, also heavily in London, obviously, because there's a lot of knife crime. Using boxing to get kids off the streets in the actual manner that I've just described. It's sort of a sport that can really, really do that and teach young kids a lot about themselves. So Fighting on the Inside was born, unfortunately, because of lockdown, as it did with everything COVID, unfortunately, put a lot of things on the back burner. We did get a couple of season contract signed to start the podcast, but then lockdown happened, and I really thought we were looking at doing it over Zoom, but I thought it would take a lot away from this conversation. I think 3-4 people in a room talking openly about this will really, it's where the magic will happen. So we sort of shelved it, and then 8 months ago, chatted to Johnny Nelson, chatted to a few people that I'd met sort of in the industry, floated the idea about, and then looked for sponsorship, and it just sort of was born bigger and better than I could have ever imagined. Really, we had an awesome set built. We've got some really good support, and it's a non-profit. It's all in aid of Gloves Up, Knives Down. And yeah, here we are. Episode 2 is just released. We've got episode 3 coming out tomorrow. We've had some amazing guests, and it's been a wild ride, and it's going to. I think it's going to be really good. I've had some amazing feedback from it as well, and it's sort of hitting that it's on message to exactly what I hoped it would be. And we're getting a really good response. People sharing it around, saying that it's really valuable. So we're happy.
Just want to go back to
long explanation, that wasn't it?
Good. Going back to sort of one of the first things you mentioned there, boxing helped you, mentally, physically, etc. I want to go back to it because firstly, it's going to be your personal experiences with the sport, but on the outside looking in, people look at you and go, right, you had a career model and you've been in Love Island, you've got the perfect life, surely. But it's not always the case, especially with Love Island. We see a lot of people come out, and there's been people who have suffered with mental health, and people have taken their own lives. Just talk to me a little bit about how boxing helped you.
Boxing's been an outlet for me. It's been something that I've needed multiple times in my life. Living away from home from a young age. I was 17 when I moved to New York. Doing a job that, don't get me wrong, at the surface of it was all fun and games. I had people going, "Oh, you're doing so well for yourself. You're doing this awesome job, and everyone would love to be in your position." Don't get me wrong. I was massively thankful for doing that job, but I was around a lot of things I probably shouldn't have been. I was living away from home. I was easily led astray. I was drinking a lot. I was partying a lot. I was, and to be fair, doing a job that I really didn't like. There's a lot of materialism, a lot of superficial sort of. The focal point of the whole industry is highly superficial, and I just felt a little lost and a little sort of unfulfilled and a little useless. And I battled with mental health problems on and off for a long time. The only thing that ever really sort of kept me going, or at least the only epicenter I had to, or like place I could sort of retreat to would be the boxing gym. For many reasons. It was like the camaraderie there, the exercise. There's no surprise or no new bit of information that exercise releases endorphins and genuinely can make you happier, let alone not like, it literally has the biochemical reaction. It helps you, but it weren't just that. It was belonging somewhere, learning something, being focused, being disciplined, and having something that I would always get up and go and do. And when you lack direction and lack structure, that's probably the worst sort of devil makes work for idle thumbs, really. When you don't really have a lot to focus on, it's really, really bad for anybody's brain. I think humans need a purpose, they need structure, and they need something to focus on every day, something to get up for. And boxing gave me that. And again, it taught me a lot about myself as well. I just found it's where I grew a lot as a person, internally and externally, and it helped me deal with a lot as well. So yeah, it was a massive part of my life. And recently, I don't think I've ever, apart from when I was 16 till I was about 19, I don't think I boxed a lot. Before that, I boxed in amateur clubs, and then from 19 onwards, I just got right back into it and it never let go. Like I can't think of a time when I won't go to the gym and train at least 3-4 days a week in the boxing gym, because I feel like I need it these days. I really do.
with the modelling career and being at such a young age, there's always, the perception of you've got to be perfect, you've got to be ripped, you've got to be chiseled, this, that, and the other. It probably brings a high amount of pressure on you to continue your image of looking like that, to continue and progress your career. Could there be, or has there ever been a slight danger of overdoing it in the gym because you need to stay perfect as such, or is it different because it's a boxing gym?
Do you know what? I've never, like, it sounds silly, but I obviously trained to stay in a certain shape because I would have people pressuring me sort of work wise and jobs, and you'd get if you don't fit into a size 30 pair of trousers, you'd have people commenting when you're on set, and that kept me sort of training in a sense to stay a certain size. But for me, exercise was never fundamentally about that. It was never like that. Was never why I was really in there at the heart of it. Like, I've always exercised since I was young. My mates will tell you when I was 13, 14, I used to lock myself away. I had a little weight bench for Christmas once, and that was all she wrote, and it was just because it made me feel better, and it made me it relaxed me, made me more confident. It was something that, it really helped me in day-to-day life. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure on models to look a certain way, but myself, that wasn't personally where I trained. But I will say, when I said I hated the industry, that was one of the biggest reasons why. It was a horrible industry to be in, to be honest. It was a really weird place to be. Do you know what the disconnection was for me? Being told that I was doing something that was so great and that everyone would want to do, and everyone sort of like, was jealous of almost. Grass is always green, I understand, but people going, I'd love to do what you do, and you got paid well, and I lived and flew around the world, and all those things I'm thankful for. But in reality, what you're doing is you're selling the idea of a perfect image that's a complete lie to sell clothes. You're basically you're being told that you need to look this way. The reason you need to look this way is because they want you to look that way, to portray a certain image, to go and make people feel bad about themselves, to make them go and buy the product to fix it. Do you know what I mean? That's ultimately what it is. It's just lying, and it's making and creating one idea of what people find attractive, or the fashion world, and what people find attractive moves like in fads over the years. You look back 30 years ago, models look completely different to they do today. Then the size 0 thing came in, and then it was like, first it was muscly, then it was skinny, then it was girls, like really tall girls, then it was like it changes. But that's because the industry changes and tells you what to want to look like, and people don't realize that's the case. We all think, we find, we like what we like because we just do it. It's natural. No, it's not natural. You're taught that. You're taught that by marketing and media. You're taught that for a certain reason, because they're going to offer you the solution to want to that will, they offer you the answer to look that sort of way that they've groomed you to want to look. Do you know what I mean? And noticing that, realizing that, and being on the shoots and seeing how it works, seeing all the inner workings, and seeing how it's a really fucking negative thing to be a part of, to be honest. And that was the biggest thing for me. That was a real disconnection between what I was doing and what I wanted to be doing. And it wasn't that. I didn't like that. I didn't like that about the industry. And like I say, I don't want to be ungrateful. It's given me a hell of a life, made me travel, paid me well. But it created a real dislike for a lot of the world and a lot of the media and a lot of marketing. So that's where I think a lot of the mental health stuff came into it as well. And like you're completely right. The pressure to look a certain way, I did feel it was there, but my real issue was my job was to put that pressure on the rest of the world to sell them fucking products. Ultimately, do you know what I mean? That was my real issue with it.
So, back onto the podcast, you mentioned Gloves Up, Knives Down. I was with you at a event down Repton Gym about this time 3 years ago. For Gloves Up, Knives Down, like you say, pandemic, COVID, lockdown, that sort of put a little bit of a stop to the promotion and marketing of the charity, really. Just talk to me about the work you do with those guys and why it's so important, and what they do behind the scenes that we don't see.
Well, Gloves Up, Knives Down have done a hell of a lot of work. They've done work. They've opened up a hub where they can, they get loads of influential people to come down and speak to kids. They go across the country, raising funds for gyms, equipment, do all sorts of different sort of activities, and open up little hubs for kids to be able to come and get into boxing and learn and understand and be around people that motivate these young kids to want better for themselves and it's not even wanting better for themselves. It's being in situations where maybe they wouldn't have had the guidance to lead them into a positive situation like a boxing gym, or have those sort of I think a big thing with what boxing does is it can offer a parental figure or a sort of figure of authority to teach young kids discipline and things that are really, really important in lives to kids that maybe are lacking that for whatever reason. So there's loads and loads of things these guys are doing. They're doing it all over the country. But like I said, they opened up a hub in London, and they've had people like Eddie Hearn go down and speak to these guys. And so not only are they out there on the ground really sort of spreading the word and trying to get young kids motivated and inspired to push themselves and learn something and train and exercise and be disciplined and fall in love with the sport for all the reasons I've explained earlier. But they're also going up and down the country and raising money and funds to help them actually be able to do that. So I think it's brilliant. And it is funny because I've always thought, like I said, about what boxing can do. And it's nice to see people. You speak to most boxers, they understand this as well. But it's nice to see a charity going out there and really putting that into practice and seeing how sort of far-reaching they can get that message, really. So yeah, they're a brilliant organisation.
And just the last question, Jamie. We mentioned obviously knife crime, how much boxing can help, how much boxing can help, mental health, etc. And we mentioned that a minute ago about the influence boxing. If it gets kids into the gyms, that's probably the best thing that influencer boxing can do. But for me, I've always said it, I've said for years, boxing should be on the school curriculum. Now, don't get me wrong, not necessarily sparring. Not everyone's going to want to spar. However, the training, the discipline mainly should be in schools, in my opinion. What do you think about that being brought into schools?
See, I think I 100% think it should be brought into schools. I think, like I said, I think there's something about this sport. There's something about one-to-one combat, that situation that will teach somebody more about themselves and their emotions and how to handle them than any other sport will, because it is in that situation of you and someone that wants to hurt you or some form of conflict that is real. It's real life, and you'll go out into the world and you'll have the same emotions. You'll be reactive. And what boxing does is teaches you to respond, not react. So when you're wanting to freak out or you're panicking or you're aggressive or anything like that, someone starts on you, you're about to go into a board meeting, you're freaking out, whatever happens to your emotions in whatever scenario, boxing teaches you to harness all that, calm down in that moment and respond. And there's a big difference between responding and reacting. That is massively valuable to any kid. I do believe it should be in schools for that reason, because you can't get it from any other sport. You can't get that sort of lesson. And I think kids need to understand their emotions, and it will teach them more about it than any other sport. And I would even say, of course, let kids spar in school. If it's controlled, you've got the right people there. If they want to, never force a kid to do anything. Have boxing in schools because it's a massively valuable skill, has transferable skills out into the outside world. And don't be worried about safety, because if you're sparring and it's controlled and it's under the right sort of, it's all done properly, it's perfectly safe. Like, how many different sports don't have risks? You can break your legs, you can be concussed in football, in anything. You can go and run in the fucking playground and slip and bang your head. There's risk everywhere. But the reward versus the risk for me, for boxing, I think young kids should do it. I want my kids to do it. I want my nephew to do it. I want everyone to give it a go. I'm not saying go and be a pro, go for the world title. That's for different people. Like, if you want to do that, great, it'd be amazing. But just learn those lessons. Take you a year in the gym, learn about yourself, and it will change your life. I really do believe it will. So yeah, I'm all for it in schools. I'd love to see it. But unfortunately, I think the reputation boxing and combat sports has as being brutal and being a fight, it's not. It is a sport. I think that's going to hinder it and hold it back, and I don't think we will see it in schools.
Absolutely. Now, it's the last thing to sign off, Jamie. I don't want you to tell me who gave you the message or whatever, because I don't want you to give any spoilers away for your podcast. But you mentioned it was about getting fighters' messages and what they've learned. What one thing was you told that was the biggest surprise to you?
From our guests so far?
Yeah.
Oh God, you should have set me up with this one.
Don't make it easy.
Yeah. Do you know what? There's a reason, and it's not going to be a spoiler, but there's a reason Johnny Nelson is a co-host for this thing. There's a reason he was just masterfully placed in this position for the message we're getting across, because that guy was a nervous wreck. His own words, a sissy when he was younger. All of these different things. He was scared. He was fearful, and right up until like his pro career, he was losing. He had no self-confidence. All of these different things. I think he always says this one thing that rings so true, and it rings true to me. Never mistake nerves for fear. Fear's got a negative connotation to it, a negative attachment. We think fear's bad, and most of the time, fear isn't bad, and fear most of the time is just nerves, and you can use those nerves for your benefit. But I think anxiety and all of these different things is thinking that when you're just nervous about something, everyone feels it. You're not alone. You're not scared. There's nothing negative about it. That can all be turned into a positive if you learn how to. And in terms of the message of this and Johnny's story, he really shows people that that is the truth and how much benefit and positive life change can come from harnessing that and understanding that. So I think it tied everything in. And like I say, when he said that and when we done the episode with him, it was episode 1 and he explained his story, it really resonated with me. And I think it will resonate with a lot of people that listen. So that's probably my favorite quote so far. We've done some brilliant episodes with some massive guests. We've got a massive one out on Friday. I've been really, I think what this podcast will do is show a lot of people that these fighters, that some of them that have been very controversial, some of them people might seem as mouthy and whatever they may think of these people. I think this will show everybody in a new light, because a lot of these guys came out with some absolute gems of knowledge, wisdom. And it's exactly like as I expected. I think it will show people a different side to their favorite fighters, and there'll be many more gems of wisdom like the one, Johnny provided throughout the series. So, yeah, it's been a ride, but that was my favorite quote from Johnny.
Fantastic. By the time this goes out, episode 3 of Fight on the Inside will be released. Just tell us where people can see it or hear it. Is it on all platforms for podcast?
Yes, episode 3, Billy Joe Saunders. It is on YouTube. It's on Spotify, Acast, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you listen to your podcasts. But if you want to see the full, we've got a full set built and everything. If you want to watch the whole thing on a YouTube show, go to YouTube/@Web3 Entertainment. That's our channel, and you can be able to watch the full show there. Or go to FOTI Podcast, FOTI Podcast, @FOTI Podcast on Instagram. Click the link, and it's got all the attachments there.
Perfect. Jamie, thank you very much for your time. I won't keep you no longer, but we'll speak again soon.
Legend. Cheers, James.
No worries, mate.